Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session of our Sparks brought to you by Synapse QA. All right, let me give a little bit of introduction about ourselves. So, our vision, we are a community driven platform that connects and fosters talented minds to create an empire that expands beyond its pages and transforms contents more powerful by ensuring it is openly available by redefining creativity. Just a little bit about ourselves. We are a free platform that connects and finds voices that are usually lost somewhere. We are relatively young. We are around since March 2020, yet we are one of the best and globally acclaimed platform with 30 plus talents on board. We are also accountability partner for content curation. We are constantly trying to redefine creativity with unique ways of knowledge sharing. How we do that? We have so far hosted two global events, one meetup, parallel learning series, teller of tales, blogcasts, study notes, and many, many more. Also, we have partnered with other communities for 5 global testing conferences as well. Okay, so over here, you're looking at our two major events. The first one is Super Hits, which is a global write-a-thon event. And the second one is Sparks, which is a webinar anthology, which we are currently in right now. Okay, a little bit on Super Hits 2021 timeline. On 12th of December 2021, we have announced all the 12 shortlisted articles, which you can find in Super Hits page right now. I think the link will be shared in the chat, so do check it out. Also, on 1st of January 2022, we will be announcing the winner of the articles. And also, there are some contests running right now. So there will be prize announcement as well. So don't miss out. Do block the calendars and check it out. Okay, so back to today's topic. So today's session is session number 12. The topic for today would be to measure or not to measure. That is the question by Mariam Umar. Before I hand over to Mariam Umar, I would like to give a small introduction about her. Okay, so Mariam Umar, she works in London as head of quality engineering. She started her career 14 years ago as QA test engineer in the finance and mobile industry. After transitioning to the e-commerce sector, Mariam performed QA in various capacities for online restaurants and travel services. She continues to work in QA as a leader, now with special focus on sustainable delivery practices. In addition to this, Mariam has been a keen advocate of creating and sustaining diverse teams. She has been speaking at schools and universities to educate students about what the industry has to offer and what creative space it can be. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to invite Mariam Umar to the stage.
Hi Ram, thank you for that intro. Hello everyone.
Hi, I think they can see. It's on the chat, I guess. Yeah,
Oh right, okay,
yeah,
fine.
yeah. I will stop
Let's just
sharing
see.
my screen. Okay, there you
Okay,
go. Yeah,
let me share my screen.
sure. Yes,
We're
I can
good to
see it.
go, right? Right.
Yep, yep.
Brilliant. All right, let's kick this off. Hello everyone. As Ram explained, just introduce myself. Thank you for that intro. My name is Mariam Omar. I'm originally based in London. Currently, I'm traveling in the subcontinent, but I thought it'll be a nice little break to come and talk about something which I've struggled with during my journey, and it's something which is also very interesting for me. Um, so, what we're going to talk about today is here's a short overview. We're going to talk about measuring quality. I should have spell checked my slides. Apologies. We'll talk about measuring quality. We'll also talk about the types of metrics that I've worked on, and then we'll also talk about measuring the right items. Right. So, the first thing is whenever quality engineers come into an organization, especially my experience has been that I've been the first person in the team. And it started with, okay, can you start testing the application we're working on? And I started with the idea that, okay, this is the application, these are the scenarios I can think of, and this is how we can test it. But really, as you move on and as you do more and more testing, you start thinking about quality assurance as a whole, that what we are producing as a team, as an engineering organization, as a wider organization, is it something which is of high quality? Meaning, is it something that the customer is actually expecting to see? So quality can span across multiple dimensions in an organization. And my experience has been that quality is something which can be quantitative or qualitative. What I mean by that is sometimes we we hear from our customers that I don't feel that the product is a nice product. It's a soft, um, you know how there are soft skills and hard skills. It's like it's something which cannot be articulated. What I find aesthetically good on a website may not be what the client finds aesthetically good on a website. As an example, so when it comes
Um,
to things like that,
I'm sorry,
sorry,
Mariam, to interrupt. I think we can't see your slide. I
you
think you need to
cannot
reshare.
see my slide.
Yep, yep, yep.
You
I think you just need.
should be able to see it because it's on the same screen.
Maybe you need to try to reshare one more time.
One
Sure, sure.
second. Share screen. Let me do a window.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be good.
I think that'll be better. Please stop me if it doesn't work.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Is this working?
Yes, now we can see it's all good now.
You can see it, right? Like
Yes,
it's
correct.
transitioning. Yeah. All right.
Yep, yep.
Brilliant.
All right.
Okay, sorry. So where did I lose you guys? Right. Let's go back to talking about how quality can be quantitative or qualitative. When you think about quality being qualitative, it's something that a customer feels about quality as a whole, and that can be different from how the organization feels about quality versus how a customer feels about quality. And honestly, I feel like there's only so much you can do to try and understand the qualitative measures of quality. For the scope of this conversation, we'll talk about things which can be quantified, meaning we can put a number against it and really understand if that number is sufficient for us as an organization and a QA team to really think about if we're happy about the product that we're producing. Quality can really be measured for multiple things, and my experience has been that it can be measured for processes, it can be measured for engineering, and it can be measured for releases. What I mean by that is when we talk about quality processes, it really talks about the ways of working within a team, within an engineering organization, with the product teams, and so on. When we talk about measuring quality for engineering, that's really about using things like first principles. For example, if you're using unit tests, what's the coverage and so on, defect rates, things like that. And we talk about quality of the releases, I classify that as something separate because at the end of the day, when you're releasing a product, usually your CEO or your exec team is asking you, if you're a lead or if you're a QA team, they're asking you, how is the release going? Do you think we'll hit it on time? Um, how did the customer respond to a specific release and so on? So really, it's easy to define quality in these three angles. Um, I personally have worked with quite a few metrics. A lot of my inspiration and something which I actually got a lot of guidance from my mentors came from the book Accelerate. It's written by Jess Humble, Dr. Nicole Forsgren, and Jean Kim, and also the State of DevOps report, which is now called the Torah project. They talk about a lot of factors which can be used to measure high performing teams. Again, that becomes something which is very team specific, but you can really extract some of the information in there and see what you can actually use in the organization. A lot of you may have come across these common metrics generally when we talk about quality. The first thing that we're all really measured on, I see, is, oh, how many defects did you find when you were doing testing? What really it should be about is how many defects did we find in a specific environment? How many defects did we find in a release by the team? How long did it take to find those defects and so on? It's really, and I find that that's problem we have in the industry in general, that people start measuring quality assurance by the number of defects, whereas that's only one aspect of quality assurance. Another one, which is really common, is test automation. Um, there's a lot of conversation about how many scenarios did we automate, or how robust were these tests over multiple environments? Did we find flaky tests? How was the test data generated, and so on? Again, all of these things are something which can be measured, and it often is in many environments as well. The last one, which is really common from a testing perspective, is regression tests. We all do regression tests before signing off a release. And often the question then becomes, how many tests are in our regression test suite? Do they suffice signing off the quality of a product? How long does it take to execute the regression test suite, and so on? So these three metrics are an example of some really common things that we hear about in the quality space in many organizations. What's important to mention here is that metrics on their own are not useful. It's very important to think about the fact that how are you going to infer from those metrics. For example, if I report to the engineering lead that we found 20 defects in this release, just giving that number doesn't help. You really need to talk about what does that number represent. Is that something we can accept as an organization? Or if we articulated it as, we found 20 defects in the release one day after the release went out, and 4 of them were high impact defects, so which for us as an organization is not something which we're happy with. So how can we reduce that number? So that's the type of description which is very useful for the organization. Another step further which you can take is not only ask them how we can stop creating those defects, but really suggest that if we started testing early, for example, if we introduce some quality gates in our pipeline, and we were given the time to implement something like this, then we can probably cut that number down in the long run. So that's the type of description as leads, I would say, people who are guarding the quality of a product really need to start conversing about. There are some uncommon metrics as well, things which I would recommend if you read the book Accelerate. These are metrics which are, again, really useful for teams if they wish to use it. Again, the inference of the metrics is really important as well. One of them is the speed of development, which is something which is sometimes really important for product companies, mainly because they want to talk about how long it will take the team to take the product to market. And that's really when you talk about how many people do you need to develop this piece of software, how much time do you need to develop the feature, and how good are your estimates. Something like this, a key indicator like speed of development, is really good for assessing whether the team's estimates are actually reflective of how complicated and how complex and how much time a feature is actually taking when it comes to development. Something also which I'd like to mention here is a lot of places talk about development as only writing code for the feature. We really need to start pushing forward with the idea that development includes the activity of testing as well, or call it the speed of engineering a feature. Sometimes the use of words really helps you pivot the teams to think about the speed of delivery of a feature differently. Another one which is really useful is mean time to green, or Mttg. This one is something which you can use to determine how long does it take for a red build to go green. You may think about, why is this metric important? The thing is that a lot of times in organizations, we try and specify the SLAs when it comes to incidents to our clients, that if there is a production incident, then it will take us less than an hour to fix it and turn it around. How the organization does that internally is secondary. It could be that the organization only believes in fixing forward, or the organization only believes in rolling back, and so on. And if we're rolling back, how are we ensuring testing, and so on. So that's very internal process that the organization works on. But trying to put a number to something like this really helps you understand that if we are saying we can fix an incident in production in an hour, if you try and monitor as soon as a red build has gone, as soon as a build has gone red, and how long it takes the team to get it to green, it's a really good mirror for you to understand that whether we can actually hit SLAs when it comes to production time. Another one is defect rate in relation to automated tests. We put a lot of emphasis on creating test automation. The challenge here is that you want to think about that, are these automated tests actually helping us to discover defects? Because what happens in the long run, and even I've made this mistake as a tester, is that you start spending a lot of time just automating the happy parts rather than stepping back and really thinking about what are the types of scenarios that can actually happen from a user's perspective and automate those scenarios and then go back. I think, and as an engineer's mindset, we always think about how to solve the problem quickly rather than just stepping back, using that thinking time, creating mind maps, or using other techniques to really think about what test scenarios we need to create. And if we started doing that, it will really help us discover defects earlier in their life cycle. Because eventually, if you start measuring that you're spending more time fixing flaky tests and you're still finding defects when you're deploying to staging, then it's not such a fruitful activity. You will start getting pushback on creating test automation as a whole, that we're still finding defects. Why did we hire all these automation testers then? So it's really important to measure something like this. Another one which is really useful is quality of acceptance criteria. This one, I think, is probably the most useful metric in terms of determining whether the acceptance criteria written in a feature or an epic actually makes sense for everybody in the team. Because if there's lack of clarity when trying to read the acceptance criteria, you're going to start building something which is then not very useful for the organization, the product, and ultimately your client. So it's important to think about or create a standard of how you're creating the acceptance criteria. Again, if you really think about this metric, this is something which can't really be measured, as we spoke about quantitative versus qualitative metrics. And this is something which can be qualitative. You can make it quantitative by trying to specify a specific format that you want all acceptance criteria to be created in. Something like this becomes really useful, especially if some of you have used the tool called X-Ray, which is a Jira plugin, which adds traceability from acceptance criteria to automated tests. For that, you need to make sure that acceptance criteria is written in a certain way. Some more uncommon metrics, PR review rate and PR review size, or pull request review rate, or code review rate and code review size. I initially never thought about this metric, and it's something I read about when I discussed it with my previous CTO as well. Something like this can really impact the process of a team. You want to think about how quickly the team is reviewing pull requests. And the second thing is, how big are the pull requests in the team? If you are going to start reviewing a test when a pull request is created, you don't want to review a test where there's 3,000 lines in one file. Obviously, it's going to take time. It's going to be complicated. The feedback will be slow for the engineer and so on. You can also think about doing peer reviews, and then there's a whole conversation about time versus cost of doing a pull request. So it's really important to measure something like this because it tells you about the agility and the consistency of the work that a team is doing. So we've spoken about quite a few metrics here as examples, but the problem really is that sometimes you have all of these numbers. And for people who are viewing these numbers, it just becomes a mishmash of information. So how do you create some useful information out of the numbers? It's really important to make sure that you're measuring the right thing, which is why I talk about this, whether you want to measure, whether you measure or you don't want to measure, because sometimes quality in an organization can be something which is only qualitative, and that's how the organization functions. I personally like to recommend that I feel that when you put a number to something, it really helps articulate the problem in a better way. For example, I'll talk about an experience in my last organization that we had a regression testing week, which lasted 2 weeks. And I asked when I joined that, I was like, what was the reason why this number was 2 weeks or not 3 weeks or not 1 week? Was there some data which proved that we needed 2 weeks? And the answer was no, it was just a finger in the air kind of estimate. It's like, okay, fine. And then I went to my QA engineers and I asked them that what was the reason? What do you think we can do? Because we want to try and push regression testing should probably be the shortest testing cycle you have in terms of feedback. You want to do the maximum amount of automated testing earlier on in your development cycle and provide feedback earlier on. Regression testing is something which happens really late in the cycle of a product feature, which means that the feedback you're giving to the team is quite delayed, which means that the fix will be delayed as well. So we wanted to figure out how can we reduce those 2 weeks. And the first thing we did was measured how many automated versus manual tests did we have in each product area. And we actually added a number to it. And it was really easy for us to see very quickly that 70% of the front end tests we had were manual, which was contributing to the maximum amount of time. And if any one of you has done front end testing, you can understand that there's so many permutations that a customer can use interface in. Compared to an API. With APIs, yes, there can be many combinations and permutations as well, but it's still simpler to test compared to a UI, because with UI, you're also looking at things like number of browsers, number of OSs, network speed, and so on. There's multiple things. So we use that number of 70%, and that was our goal, that we want to reduce this by 10% every sprint. And very quickly, we were able to reduce the regression testing week to half a day by changing those manual tests to automated tests. So really, when we added that type of inference to the numbers, it's important to help you understand and improve the quality of your product and your processes. So when you have so many numbers to play with or available, how do you actually measure things which are useful to an organization? It could be something which was useful for your QA team, but it may not be useful for the engineering team. I have been in situations where I've created these metrics really regularly. I kid you not, it takes a lot of time to produce these metrics, whether using Jira or other tools. And not only producing the numbers, and you really need to spend time on adding a statement in front of them as to why this number is important. So the first thing is that you really need to find your stakeholders. You need to think about the people who will actually use these numbers to make decisions. Stakeholders can be people like tech leads, people like engineers in their team, exec team, and so on. So you can really articulate that, okay, this is the level of quality we have. We feel only 20% confident because of the amount of test automation, plus the amount of features we deliver, plus the number of defects we find. Just create a useful story out of the numbers, and you will find that you'll get a better buy-in when you're trying to extract this information. Another thing which is really important is that it's really useful to create action points for the exec team. So for example, if we go back to the conversation about 70% front-end tests were manual, the action point for the exec team was that you need to give some time to the front-end team, which means you're not going to produce as many features for the front end of the product, because we want to focus on going from manual to automated. And that's the recommendation you want to give on the basis of the numbers that you found, which then helps them articulate and plan the roadmap better. Another thing which becomes really useful is when you start extracting numbers, it can be 10 or 20 pages long, that, okay, this is the type of coverage we have, and then this is the type of coverage we have per product area, and then this is the type of coverage we have per API, and so on. Nobody wants to read a long report, although it is useful for you over time. I would not say that you don't produce it, but try and provide a summary of the items that you find for the entire organization to ingest. In today's world, we're all really distracted, especially now because we're doing hybrid working. You don't want, and people's attention spans go from 5 minutes max. So you want them to read the top 4 lines of your report and really think about, okay, this is where the problem of quality assurance is in the organization. What can I do to try and help this? So try and provide a summary on top of your reports that you use to create these metrics in. Another thing is, once you create metrics, something I've always pushed my teams to do is use those metrics. They can only be useful if they are applied. Um, for example, if we talk about, let's talk about PR review rate. If something we find is that each pull request has at least 10 files that are being edited on average, and the size of all of these, the lines of code edited in all of these files is, let's say, 200 lines per pull request, of course it's going to take a lot of time. So you take that information in your team retrospective and you talk about it and say, okay, I think this is taking a lot of time before we're signing off a feature. What can we do to reduce this, and produce action items for the team to use? I talk about this a lot because it's important for people in the QA function to represent the problems that we're seeing in the product, whether it comes to engineering or processes or releases, because our job is not to, pinpoint that, oh, you found this, you created this feature incorrectly because you didn't test for it and so on. That's not our job. Our job is to really support the engineering functions and really help them think about how we can improve the quality of the organization as a whole. The last item is, when you start working on metrics, it's really easy to slip into team related issues rather than product related issues. An example of this is, you can start going into, oh, that team has only 3 files edited per pull request on average, and this team has 10 files that are edited. That's why this team is not as good, as efficient as the other one. That's not the way of inferring a problem for the team. What you really want to think about is, what can we do for the product first? Yes, you can help teams as well. I'll talk about that next. But really try and make sure that you're focusing on the product quality first, because that's what um, is revenue, is generating revenue for the organization. And that's what really matters for the exec team first. So how do you use metrics to help teams? The first thing, again, is make sure you work with the tech lead or the engineering manager. Talk to them, ask them that, okay, I feel I want to try and help you improve the quality situation in your team. What do you think are the real problems? And work with them to try and figure out what would they like to measure, rather than suggesting things. Put the ball in their court and be there to support them, and try and then work within the QA team or with your SREs to try and extract useful information for the team. Um, Usually something like this is where we can start talking about ways of working. Ways of working is really, how does a team function on their own when they're trying to do feature work? This is something that you can help work with your scrum masters or program managers with, to really help understand that how can we work efficiently as a team. Some ideas of metrics that you can use with the teams is AC definition, acceptance criteria definition, QA kickback. This is a metric you can use to figure out how often a feature goes from QA to dev on your board, to really think about that. Is the engineer even looking at how the feature is behaving before handing it over for final sign off, and so on? It again becomes a real useful point for discussion. PR reviews is another one we spoke about. And then feature completion versus feature commitment. This is something, as we can also talk about, as velocity of the team, because if you're always under delivering versus what you're committing to, this means there's two problems there. One, you're actually not efficiently estimating your features. And the second thing is, you're actually adding pressure on your team every single time. And this can really try and introduce burnout in your team, which nobody really wants. So, in conclusion, the first thing to think about is try and measure the product versus team metrics. Um, Try and think about what is it that really matters to an organization. Secondly, find the stakeholders who will use those metrics. Don't go away and start measuring things on your own because you heard it in this talk or you read it in a book. Really try and think about, if you're going to spend the energy trying to extract those numbers, will it actually help and impact some decisions in the organization as well. And then once you have those numbers, try and summarize those results with actionable points. Um, just putting numbers in front of people doesn't help. You really want to try and suggest to them that what can they do in order to help us reduce those numbers or increase those numbers as a whole. um, at the end, I also would like to say that I think it's still important to think about why you want to measure versus why you shouldn't measure. I have been in situations where you try and do a lot of useful numbers for the organization and produce your own reports, but at the end of the day, it becomes an exercise which only you start enjoying and nobody else is reading it. Um, you really should try and focus on measuring things which provide really high impact to an organization, and hopefully you can then find metrics which are useful and can help improve the quality of your product. Thank you for your time, everyone. I hope you enjoyed some of the things I've learned on my journey. If you feel like connecting, I go by Mariam Umar on LinkedIn, or you can tweet to me as well, and I'll be really happy to try and understand what journeys you've been on for metrics specifically, or if you want, I'd like to hear your stories as well when it comes to metrics. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for the wonderful, wonderful slides. All right, it was very, very informative. Uh, there's a lot of key points which I've taken note as well, because we all can relate to certain situations you've mentioned
Yeah.
about how the organization view this metrics and so on. Okay, so let me look at the Q&A sessions. Okay, while waiting for the questions to come in, I have a few questions myself. Okay,
Yeah, sure.
right. So the first one is like, what is your advice for QA whom are working in a company, but then the company, right? They don't really believe in QA. They should be involved in the development sites in terms of measuring their metrics. For example, you spoke about uh, development estimation and PR review and so on, right? uh, Usually it's not so easy that they accept that QA should be in that. Like, what are QA doing there? So what
Yeah.
would be your advice for QAs who are facing the kind of situation, so that they can bring the changes and awareness to the organization?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to really help define the mission of the QA team. What are they there to do? If they're only there to automate tests, then don't call them QA engineers. They're test automation experts. Honestly, I think there's a lot of problems we see in this space.
Uh-huh.
And of course, I understand that people can think about why is he or she in this team meeting when we don't need them? What is this number doing for us? It's really important to redefine what QA actually means for
Hmm.
an organization, because quality assurance encompasses test automation is a very small part, and I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, right? It just is a really small part, and the whole idea of quality assurance is how can be more efficient,
Hmm.
right? How can we be more efficient as a team, and how can we produce a product which the customer wants? I think if we start using the word quality too much as well, that also sometimes doesn't help people, because then again it's still vague for them, right?
Yeah.
So the understanding of the word is really important. That's why I like to say that it's important to go back to the basics and really explain to everybody what is it that we're looking for
Hmm.
as an organization, right? And then if there's still pushback, then I think the problem is a bigger problem. It's something that the CTO or the VP of engineering needs to be spoken to about, that what do you expect from the QA engineers? Because then the role is wrong. The role really should be test engineers, because you want them to be testers only and not QA specialists, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good one. redefining what actually QA testers rules are about, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I think a lot of companies still don't really get it. They still have this traditional mindset that testers should only test and do not question anything.
Yeah. You'll
Yeah.
be surprised because I have spoken to people in who work in companies in the US, in
Hmm.
Europe, in Asia, and
Hmm.
the mindset is so different in every, I would say, geographical location. Like
Right.
I find in Asia, I used to work with a bank in Thailand called SCB,
Okay.
and there were testers in there as well. And they really understood what quality meant. Like they
Oh.
really understood that we need to test early.
Hmm.
Whereas in the US or some European companies, I still feel like we're still so far behind. We're still trying to push them to understand what QA actually means. It's a really interesting thing. If you read um, tweets or articles written by people who work in those organizations versus people who are working in Asia, you'll
Hmm.
find such a variation of understanding there as well. Excuse me.
No worries.
Yeah. So yeah, so that's what I have seen so far.
Interesting perspective. Didn't see that coming actually. Okay. Another question. Okay. Hmm. Um, is there any tools that you recommend, like when it comes to presenting the matrix, apart from Excel sheets to show the graph and so on? Is there anything else? Or
So something you can use. Don't use Excel sheets, please. Don't use Excel sheets. Uh, you can use something called Google Data Studio. I actually learned
uh,
about it 2 years ago. It's a really nice way of creating dashboards, and you
oh,
can connect it to Excel sheets. So you can
right.
take really nice, pretty graphs in it, and then you can also set it to automatically update. So
Mm-hmm.
I actually set up Excel to automatically fetch data for automated tests
All
from
right.
our AWS repository. There was an area, what do you call it? Forgetting the name of it, where they used to upload what tests were written, and it would automatically update the numbers in the Excel sheet, which would in turn automatically update the Google Data Studio because you can set up a schedule really easily. So I found Google's Data Studio was really useful. Initially, I did start with Excel.
Uh-huh.
I will be honest, and it was really difficult. Another one which you can use is most organizations use Atlassian products,
Mm.
Jira specifically. So you
Mm-hmm.
can actually create Jira dashboards for teams. You can actually create, I remember I actually took the responsibility to create dashboards for individual teams that
Oh,
they can use when they're going through their stand-ups every day. It's
I
really
see.
easy to extract data because all the data is there already, right? You
Uh-huh.
just need to learn to extract it in there. It's not difficult to learn at all. They have a really, you will find a lot of information on Stack Overflow and Atlassian websites and so on. So it's really easy as well. And then a third one, yeah, those two are the ones. Yeah, and then a lot of people can also use X-Ray.
Mm.
X-Ray is a really nice plugin for Jira. It really helps you visualize the traceability of
Mm-hmm.
stories to automated tests, to what versions those tests were run on, which environment, and so on, how frequently did they fail, and so on, because it's again really useful information, especially when it comes to finding incidents that the incidents were reported. Oh, but we wrote an automated test, it kept passing in staging, why didn't it pass, and so on, so on. That data is already there in front of you, so you can also use X-Ray for something like this.
Wow, I didn't know that. And certain tools you mentioned, like Atlassian, it's there in my company as well, but I didn't really explore those parts you mentioned. Something for me to
Yeah,
take
I
note. Yeah.
find it really good fun. I really enjoy it. I'm a person. I think if I had the choice, I would have actually done mathematics rather than computer science. But um, different story.
Yeah. Probably for the future. Who knows, right?
Mhm.
All right, all right. So I think we have reached the end of the session. Thank you
Brilliant.
so much, Mariam, for taking a bit of Q&A session.
Of course. Thank you.
It's great
I
having you
love
today.
doing this. Great. Thank you so much. Happy holidays, everyone. Take
Yeah, yeah.
care.
Okay, so let me share my last section. Just give me a minute. Okay, you guys can see my slides, I assume. Okay, so today's session was made possible by Applitools SLQ, Lambda Test, Test Sigma, Milk Test, and Test Project. Thank you so much to all our sponsors today. Last but not least, thank you so much for fellow attendees today. Another reminder, do check out our Super Eats launch, where we have posted all the 12 articles. Okay. If you guys have any questions regarding anything, please do shoot us an email at supereats@snapsqa.com. Also, you can guys can find us at all the social media: LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We are all over. So just hit us up there, and someone will get to you. So again, thank you so much for coming. Stay safe. Take care. Bye bye.